which is known as the Upadeshamrita. Upadesh. Does anyone know the meaning of Upadesh? Upadesh, instructions. Yeah. Instructions. Instructions, yeah. Upadesh. And then Amrita, nectar. So yeah, so literally it means the nectar of instruction. So it's a very interesting book. And of the 4 books in the Bhakti Shastri course, we have the Bhagavad Gita, which is the longest. We have the first 150 pages of the Nectar of Devotion, which is also quite long. And then we have the Ishopanishad and the Nectar of Instruction, which are much more concise, much smaller. But of the 4 books, last time I taught this, which was maybe 20 years ago, I think Nectar of Instruction was my favorite to teach. And it's interesting because the trip I've just had, I've just got back a few days from Vrindavan, from Govardhan Hill. In the last 10 days or few weeks, a number of devotees have spoken about the significance and importance of Nectar of Instruction, which for me was significant because I was about to come and teach it. So it was like Krishna was emphasizing the importance of this particular literature. So it is written by Srila Rupa Goswami, who also wrote the Nectar of Devotion, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And in these 2 books, Prabhupada said the Nectar of Devotion, which we'll study after this, the Nectar of Devotion is the law book for ISKCON. So it's basically everything we do in terms of our sadhana in ISKCON is based on the Nectar of Devotion. And the Nectar of Instruction is only 11 verses. So we can understand how important these 11 verses must be, because Rupa Goswami has he's brought his most concise, yeah, but most pertinent instructions, most significant instructions, and he's brought them down into 11 verses. And in those 11 verses, he takes us from the beginning to the end of spiritual life in 11 verses, which is quite amazing. And these verses are extremely significant. And I know some devotees, I know there was one sannyasi, I don't know if he still does it, but for a period of time, he would carry the Nectar of Instruction with him all the time because he felt like it was his guidebook. And in some ways, that's what it is. There's another book by Raghunath Das Goswami, which is called Mana Shiksha. And some devotees see that as being like a guidebook too. These are very significant books. So Prabhupada, he translated the Nectar of Instruction and gave it to us, which shows how important it must be. It was very interesting. It was only like within the last week, I was sitting at Govardhan Hill with Aniruddha Prabhu and Atul Krishna Prabhu, who are 2 very old acquaintances and friends. And the topic came up about the Nectar of Instruction. And Aniruddha Prabhu was speaking to one of Prabhupada's disciples, whose name was Hrishikeshananda. And he actually said to Prabhupada, because he had gone off for a period of time and got influenced and associated with the Gaudiya Math, some of Prabhupada's godbrothers, and was actually reinitiated because he was a young devotee. He didn't understand the etiquette. It's actually a breach of etiquette, particularly to someone like Prabhupada, like the Yuga Acharya, and another person reinitiates one of his disciples. That's a serious breach of etiquette. You don't do that. But he didn't know, he didn't understand. So he got involved with them. He was reinitiated and so forth. And then in the Gaudiya Math, they were studying the Ashtakaliya Leela, which means the 8-fold daily pastimes of Krishna, which is like the goal of Krishna consciousness. It's very esoteric. It's very advanced subject matter. And he came to Prabhupada and he said, well, they are studying this in the Gaudiya Math. We don't study this in ISKCON. do you think it would be relevant to maybe write something or comment on something, regarding the Ashtakaliya Leela and very advanced subject matters? Ashtakaliya Leela means the eight. Ashta means eight, Kaliya times. Leela means the description of the 8 periods of time in the 24 hours of a day where Krishna does different Leelas or different pastimes. So this is like the goal of Krishna consciousness, to meditate on Krishna's pastimes 24 hours a day. And some advanced devotees, I know a few devotees, who they don't sleep in blocks. Like I sleep like 7 hours a night. Like I'll go to bed at 8:30. Like when I was in India, I go to bed at 8:30, get up at 3:30. So I just sleep one block, and I don't rest during the day so much. But there's some devotees, they sleep in smaller blocks so that they can do chanting or bhajan or meditate on Krishna's pastimes in each of those periods of the day, which is quite an advanced practice. So he said to Prabhupada, maybe if you could translate something and comment on something regarding Krishna's pastimes. And then not long after that conversation, Prabhupada produced this, which is interesting, because it deals with the beginning of spiritual life to the higher states of spiritual life, and the whole thing. So Prabhupada he considered this to be a very important book, which would help us go from the beginning of our spiritual life to the final practices in spiritual life. And it was interesting. And Sachinandan Swami, I was just at a retreat with him for about 5-6 days, him and Virajan. And he was speaking about Nectar of Instruction, which I thought was very, it was just like, it was quite uncanny. I felt like it was transcendental arrangements by Krishna that he was arranging, because I knew we were coming back to Australia to teach this. And so many of the senior devotees I was speaking to were speaking about this book. And Sachinandan Swami also was telling us the importance of this book. And he said that he was in the German BBT, the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. And Prabhupada was translating the Bhagavatam, and then he stopped everything and did the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And then he went back to the Bhagavatam. And then he stopped everything and produced this book, The Nectar of Instruction. So he stopped everything and said, get this book out. Sometimes Prabhupada would do that. Because Prabhupada would translate it, but then they'd have to edit it, publish it, design the artwork. It's a whole process to produce a book. And Prabhupada said, stop everything and just concentrate on this book. Now, when the book came out, the advanced copies, they sent it to Germany to get it translated, to give to the German BBT so they could translate it into English. Into German from English. So it arrived, and Sachinandan Swami was one of the translators. That was one of his first services in ISKCON. And he said that when they first got it, it came with a memo. And it said this book was only to be read by sannyasis. Right? That was the memo they got. So Sachinandan Swami was a brahmachari, a young brahmachari, and he thought, I have to read it. Naturally, you think like that. Like, if someone gave you this book and said only a sannyasi can read it, you'd be thinking, what's in it? So obviously you read it because he had to translate it. But that was the first memo they got. And I don't know if they don't know if Prabhupada actually said that. Somehow, maybe Prabhupada said something like, it would be especially beneficial for sannyasis. Or, I'm not sure what Prabhupada said, but that was the message they got. It was only for sannyasis. So they were excited to get this book. So that was the first memo they got. It's only for sannyasis. So they thought they had to produce it, and it was only going to be 100 copies or something, and then read by very particular people. And then the second memo came a few months later, and Prabhupada said, print 100,000 copies for mass distribution. So he wanted everyone to have it. So they printed it, and then it started getting distributed on the streets. Now, the beginning is more basic in some respects. But the final verses speak about Radha Kund and very, quite advanced subject matters. But Prabhupada said, distribute it widely. So that's some of the background. It was interesting because I only heard these things in the last week or two. So it's just very significant. So I thought I'd share that with everyone. So tonight we will cover the preface, which is very important, and the first verse, which is also very important. In terms of your key memory verses, your memorization verses, you'll need to memorize the first four verses, 1, 2, 3, and 4, because they're all very significant. And if you want, you can memorize the whole 11 verses, if you want, because they're all important. And the final verses are very important, but there's not even just the first 4, but there's several after that which you would say are very important as well, which are worth memorizing. So I'm giving you 4 to memorize, which would be on your exam, but you could memorize more because they're very, very significant verses. Okay, so I'm going to read from the Nectar of Instruction. Obviously, I'm not going to read the whole commentary, the whole purport, but I'll just read various lines. Does everyone have a copy of the book? Yep. Okay, so we found when we did the Upanishad that some of the the translations weren't the same. It had been re-edited. So I'm using this edition. I can see some of your covers are different. So as I'm reading, please let me know. Yep. Yeah, the covers are different. Yep. Please let me know if it is different to what I'm reading. It doesn't really matter if it is or isn't, but just in case it's, if you're finding it challenging in some way, just let me know. Okay, preface. The Krishna consciousness movement is conducted under the supervision of Srila Rupa Goswami. The Gaudiya Vaishnavas or Bengali Vaishnavas are mostly followers of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, of whom the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan are direct disciples. Therefore, Srila Narottam Das Thakur has sung Rupa Raghunatha Pade, Hoibe Akuti, Kabe Hama Bhuchaba, Se Yugala Puriti. When I am eager to understand the literature given by the Goswamis, then I shall be able to understand the transcendental loving affairs of Radha and Krishna. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in order to bestow upon human society the benediction of the science of Krishna. Is that what everyone's got? Yep. Is that what you guys have got? Okay, so yeah, okay, it hasn't changed. That's good. So, we are called Rupanugas. Rupanugas. People call us the Hare Krishnas. The reason they call us the Hare Krishnas is because we walk up and down the streets of the world chanting Hare Krishna. So people, they naturally call us the Hare Krishnas. And we are registered in 1966, Prabhupada registered ISKCON, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So we're known as ISKCON followers or ISKCON members. And we're known as Hare Krishnas. But technically, our tradition, we are Brahma, Madhva, Gaudiya, Vaishnavas, which means our disciplic succession begins with Lord Brahma, to Madhvacharya, to Gaudiya. Gaudiya means the North Indian tradition, as Prabhupada said, Bengal, and also the north of India, UP, like where Vrindavan is. So that's Gaudiya. So we're Brahma, Madhva, Gaudiya, Vaishnavas. Vaishnavas means followers of Vishnu or Krishna. The technical name for followers of Krishna is Karshna, but we never hear anyone say that. But that term was given by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He said Karshna, or Vaishnavas. We say Vaishnavas. But if you go further, then you would say we are Rupanuga Vaishnavas, which means, and this term is often used, that we are followers of Rupa Goswami. Anuga means to follow. Anu, follow. Srila Rupa Goswami. So we are Rup Anuga Vaishnavas. We follow Srila Rupa Goswami. So everyone in our disciplic succession sees themselves in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, sees themselves as followers of Rupa Goswami. And who is Rupa Goswami in Radha and Krishna's Leela? He is Sri Rupa Manjari. Rupa Manjari is the most intimate maidservant of Srimati Radharani. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes, Radha and Krishna combine and come as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. All of Radha and Krishna's associates appear as the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Rupa Manjari became Rupa Goswami. So he is considered to be the leader of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So we are called Rupanuga Vaishnavas. And he wrote this Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and the Upadeshamrita, two of these books which we are studying in this Bhakti Shastri course. If anyone has any questions or comments as we go, then just ask. At the bottom of the page, it says, therefore, to understand the mission of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu and follow in his footsteps, one must very seriously follow in the footsteps of the six Goswamis. Sri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath, Sri Jeev Gopala Bhatta, and Dasa Raghunath. So many of the devotees in our tradition, they meditate on and focus on becoming followers of the six Goswamis of Vrindavan. Because the six Goswamis are our gurus. They are the acharyas who teach us how to follow Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings, how to worship Radha and Krishna. So the next paragraph, it says, Srila Rupa Goswami was the leader of all the Goswamis, and to guide our activities, he gave us this Upadeshamrita. In the next paragraph, it says, one's first duty is to control his mind and senses. Unless one controls his mind and senses, one cannot make any advancement in spiritual life. It's very powerful statements by Prabhupada. Because the beginning of the book, the first verse, which we'll read shortly, concentrates on emphasizing that we must control our mind and our senses in order to advance in Krishna consciousness. If you can't control your mind, if you can't control your senses, you will not be able to advance in Krishna consciousness. This is the beginning of spiritual life. So this will be described in the very first verse of the book. One must promote himself to the platform of goodness. I'll read the previous line. Everyone within this material world is engrossed in the modes of passion and ignorance. One must promote himself to the mode of goodness, sattva gun, by following the instructions of Rupa Goswami. And then everything concerning how to make further progress will be revealed. This is an extremely important point. And this point, I don't think it's always understood properly by devotees in our movement. And devotees need to study Prabhupada's books, because if you study Prabhupada's books, you'll understand the philosophy. And I think many devotees don't understand the importance of this particular point that Prabhupada's making here. We make steady advancement from the platform of the mode of goodness. Prabhupada once said, the mode of goodness is a springboard to pure goodness, which is what we're aiming for, Vishuddha Sattva. Now, many people in our movement in the Hare Krishna movement are very much absorbed in the mode of passion and maybe the mode of ignorance. Passion means be very active, just do lots of service for Krishna, which is good. We should do lots of service for Krishna. But some devotees, they're too active, but they don't spend time studying and reading Prabhupada's books and doing their sadhana properly. And if we get caught up in that mode, the mode of passion can go in two directions, right? You can either control it and then gradually lift yourself up to the mode of goodness, or it will just take you down into the mode of passion, which happens to many people. So we have to be very careful that we don't become too absorbed in the mode of passion and ignorance. But we have to elevate ourselves and practice devotional service in the mode of goodness. Because from the mode of goodness, then you can reach pure goodness or Krishna consciousness. So this is a very important point that Prabhupada's making in the very beginning of the book. Now, Prabhupada, this next line is a sutra. A sutra means a very concise truth. You know, like the Bhagavad Gita, all the verses in the Bhagavad Gita, you would call them sutras. Sutras means very concise, but it's pregnant with truth. There's so much truth within the verse. So the same with with this next line. We often quote it. Some of us often quote this particular line. It's like Prabhupada has put so much truth within this one line. Advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. So it depends on your attitude. If you want to advance in Krishna consciousness, it depends on this one thing, your attitude. Right? If you have the right attitude, you will advance in Krishna consciousness. If you don't have the right attitude, you will not advance in Krishna consciousness. It all depends on the attitude while you're performing your devotional service. Prabhupada says a follower of the Krishna consciousness movement should become a perfect Goswami. Vaishnavas are generally known as Goswamis. In Vrindavan, this is the title by which the director of each temple is known. One who wants to become a perfect devotee of Krishna must become a Goswami. Go means the senses, and Swami means the master. Unless one controls his senses and mind, one cannot become a Goswami. To achieve the highest success in life by becoming a Goswami and then a pure devotee of the Lord, one must follow the instructions known as Upadeshamrita, which have been given by Srila Rupa Goswami. So that's what the first verse, which we're about to begin, is speaking about. If you want to advance in Krishna consciousness, you have to become a Goswami. Goswami, you have to learn to control your mind and your senses. If you can't control your mind and senses, you can't advance in Krishna consciousness. We see the devotees who have got the most control of their mind and senses, they advance the most in their Krishna consciousness. At the end, Prabhupada says, Upadeshamrita constitutes the first instructions for neophyte devotees. One should follow these instructions very strictly, then it will be easier to make one's life successful. Hare Krishna. So this is September the 20th, 1975. Prabhupada completes this in Vrindavan at Krishna Balaram Mandir. Any questions so far from our esteemed audience? Okay. So now we'll begin verse 1. Tonight we'll do verse 1. Vacho vegam manasakroda vegam jiva vegam udarapasta vegam etan veganyo vishaheta dira savam abhimam pritivim sashishyat. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals, is qualified to make disciples all over the world. It's a very powerful verse. So please memorize it if you haven't already, if you don't know. Prabhupada says in the purport, why do people undergo atonement if they cannot control their senses? And then further down he says, experience is gathered by hearing and seeing. One who is less intelligent gathers experience by seeing, and one who is more intelligent gathers experience by hearing. When an intelligent person hears from the law books and shastras or scriptures, that stealing is When an intelligent person hears from the law books and shastras or scriptures that stealing is not good and hears that a thief is punished when arrested, he refrains from theft. So there are different types of intelligence. The best intelligence, first-class intelligence, Prabhupada says, you just hear something and you do it. Second-class intelligence is you hear something, but then you do the wrong thing, and then you realize, oh, that was wrong, and then you do the right thing. Third-class intelligence means you hear the instruction, but you just keep doing the wrong thing again and again. So we want to become Goswamis. We want to come to the platform of first-class intelligence, that we just hear that we should control the mind and senses, and we understand the benefit of controlling the mind and senses, and then we act on it. Right? Most of us are not on that platform, but that's the platform that we should come through. That's what the Upadeshamrita is emphasizing. Across on page 3, Prabhupada says, similarly, many spiritual practitioners chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and at the same time commit many forbidden things, thinking that their chanting will counteract their offenses. So this is the 7th offense against the holy name. Sometimes it's said to be the most serious offense. That I can commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name. In other words, I can do sinful activities, but then I can chant and I'll atone or purify myself. But it is pointed out that that is offensive to the holy name, because it means that you have an offensive mentality towards Krishna. And Krishna will not, it's an offense, so he will not purify the consciousness of the heart until one stops committing that offense. So we need to learn to control the mind and the senses if we want to advance in our Krishna consciousness. At the bottom of the paragraph, Prabhupada says, a sinful activity cannot be counteracted by a pious activity. Thus, real prayaschitta, atonement, is the awakening of our dormant Krishna consciousness. So in the Vedas, there is a system called prayaschitta. Prayaschitta means atonement. You kill another person. That's a heavy sin. You know, even they speak about killing brahmanas or cows or, you know, heavy activities. Now, whenever you do a sin, within the Vedas, there is a prayaschitta, there is an atonement. Okay, you did that, do this to atone for it. So in the Christian tradition, we hear, you know, when I was growing up at Sunday school and so forth, they taught us in the past, like people to atone for their sins, they would wear like heshing bags, which are itchy, you know, things that are, you know, to purposely irritate them, because that was like an atonement. Or, you know, they told us they put stones in their shoes and walked around with stones in their shoes because it was uncomfortable and that would atone. So this is the idea of atonement. But the problem is, Prabhupada explains, and Bhagavatam explains, it's like an elephant goes and takes bath, cleans himself, and then he goes onto the bank, rolls in the dust. So he just purified himself by doing the atonement, but then he goes and gets himself dirty again. So if we do atonement, but we don't remove the sinful desire, we'll just go and do it again. So Prabhupada's pointing out, Rupa Goswami is pointing out, the reason we need to control our mind and senses is because then we can purify ourselves through the practice of Krishna consciousness, and then we can remove the material desires, the sinful desires. They'll only become removed by the practice of Krishna consciousness. Right? And the beginning of Krishna consciousness, you have to control your mind and senses. Because if you don't control the mind and senses, then you won't be able to purify your heart properly, effectively. So this is the first verse. It teaches us, control your mind, control your senses, then you'll be able to purify your consciousness properly. Okay, so then page 4, or actually the beginning of bottom of page 3. Is it page 3 for you guys in your books? It is? Okay, that's good. Real atonement involves coming to real knowledge, and for this, there is a standard process. When one follows a regulative hygienic process, he does not fall sick. A human being is meant to be trained according to certain principles to revive his original knowledge. Such a such a methodical life is described as tapasya. So the Bhagavatam says, tapo divyam, brahma sokyam, shuddha sattvam. To come to the platform of shuddha sattva or pure goodness, where you'll taste brahma sokya or spiritual happiness, you must rise to the platform of shuddha sattva. And you must perform tapo divyam. Tapo divyam means austerities for the pleasure of Krishna. You have to do austerity for Krishna, for his pleasure. So all of us have our austerities that we do for Krishna. You know, some devotees, it's getting up early and milking the cows and cleaning their goshala. It's an austerity. You know. Tapasya. Yeah. All of us do different things. Like I was just in India, I took a devotees on tour, Parakram. I did 21 days straight of taking devotees. And on day 22, after I got up, chanted my rounds, went and had breakfast, came back to the room, and I had things to do, and I just laid on the bed and I slept for 2 or 3 hours because I was exhausted. I didn't realize it, but when everything stopped, my body just went, 21 days straight, and I loved it. It's an ecstatic service. But Tapo Divyam, it means austerity for the pleasure of Krishna, helping Krishna's devotees come closer to him. So we take them to all the holy places. But I didn't realize I was exhausted. And then, I just went in 2 or 3 hours and then I woke up. I thought, okay. I was obviously tired. So we all have to do tapasya, austerity, to please Krishna. That's how you purify your consciousness. So to overcome our sinful desires and to control our mind and senses, we have to do austerity for Krishna's pleasure. That's the point. Don't do austerity if Krishna is not satisfied by the austerity. You might say, well, I'm going to, I'm going to put stones in my shoes, for the next week. But is that going to make Krishna happy? Do austerities that make him happy. Join ISKCON. ISKCON. If you're in ISKCON, you're doing austerity. I was actually saying to Aniruddha Prabhu and Chincharupa in Govardhan only a week ago. Chincharupa actually said, I'm in awe of the devotees at Hare Krishna Valley. She actually said that. Said they do so much for Krishna. There's like 5 of us. So it's like, said, so much being done. I think you sent a message saying, I was speaking to a Toya and Chincharupa was there, saying you just gone and picked berries. Currants. And Chincharupa was very happy. She said, oh, it's so nice, so nice. Said, so much austerity. You're doing so much for Krishna. Yeah, that's it. And I said to Chincharupa, I said, it's actually a tough gig. Yeah, ISKCON's a tough gig, but Hare Krishna Valley is quite a tough gig. You know, it's not easy. It's not easy. You know, it's like that for all of us in our different areas of life, in our different areas of service. It's not easy. But you have to do that austerity for the pleasure of Guru and Krishna. And that purifies the heart of material desires. One is gradually elevated to the standard of real knowledge or Krishna consciousness by practicing austerity and celibacy, brahmacharya, by controlling the mind, by controlling the senses, by giving up one's possessions in charity, by being avowedly truthful, by keeping clean, and by practicing yoga asanas. So these are different types of austerities that we incorporate in our devotional life. However, if one is fortunate enough to get the association of pure devotee, he can easily surpass all the practices for controlling the mind by the mystic yoga process simply by following the regulative principles of Krishna consciousness, refraining from illicit sex, meat eating, intoxication, and gambling, and by engaging in the service of the Supreme Lord under the direction of the bona fide spiritual master. This is the process being recommended by Srila Rupa Goswami. So, and that's one of the realizations I've had in the last couple of weeks. You know, I was in the association of very advanced devotees. You know, His Grace Bhurajan Prabhu, Radhanath Swami, got to be around him several occasions. Sachinandan Swami and others. And you feel the benefit. You feel the benefit. As Prabhupada says here, nothing else purifies the consciousness as much as being with very advanced devotees. So we have to take the object, and I keep saying, I've been saying for 20 years plus to devotees, get as much association as you can with advanced devotees because they're not going to be here much longer. You know, Bhurajan Prabhu is 77 now. You know, they're not, it's, you know, there's not a lot of time left. As you know, for the last 20 years, since 2003, every year I go to retreats with Bhurajan Prabhu and Sachinanda because I know I need that association, advanced association. And we don't know how much longer we'll have this association. So we need to get as much as we can, right? Because that nothing else purifies the consciousness as much. Here, Maharaj was. Yeah, so yeah, like, you know, advanced devotees. These are advanced devotees, and others that I associated with. You know, and by their association, you get purified. Then Prabhupada says at the lower paragraph on page 4, he speaks about the first Vegam. So if you look at the Sanskrit, we hear the word Vegam. Vacho Vegam, Manasakruta Vegam, or Vegam means urges. Urges. We all have urges. Hands up if you have urges. One person, very good. Now everyone. We have urges. Right? Why? Because Krishna has them. We're created in God's image. Therefore, we have urges, vegan. We have to control our urges. Krishna doesn't have to control his urges. He can eat whatever he wants whenever he wants. We can't. We've tried it. Doesn't work. Eat whatever you want whenever you want. I tell you about the time I ate 4 liters of ice cream? No. I told you that one? Yeah, that was after a feast, right? And then we drove to Mooloolaba the next day and I laid down on the back seat of the bus for the whole day. Couldn't get up. It was okay because I just chanted and it didn't really matter, but we can't do what Krishna can do. We have to control our urges. Krishna does not. So the first urge, vacho, is the urge of the tongue. The tongue has 2 functions, which is to taste and to speak. The first one is speech, vacho vegam. Some people can't control their urge to speak. They just talk, even when no one's listening. Have you ever met anyone like that? I'm sure we've all met people like that. And Prabhupada explains in here, they just like hearing the sound of their own voice. It's not a good practice in spiritual life. You have to control the tongue. So Prabhupada will tell us how to control the tongue. First, one must control the speaking power. Every one of us has the power of speech. As soon as we get an opportunity to speak, we begin to speak. If we do not speak about Krishna consciousness, we speak about all sorts of nonsense. So this is the instruction of the Upadeshamrita, of the Nectar of Instruction. The first verse speaks about the 6 urges that we must control to advance in spiritual life. The first verse is the urge of speaking, and all the urges, the way we control them is by engaging them in Krishna's service, purifying them. So how do you purify the sense of speech? You talk about Krishna, things related to Krishna. Our service is related to Krishna. You know, you might be saying, oh, the tractor's broken. So it's Krishna's tractor. So if you're saying, okay, the tractor's broken and this is how we need to fix the tractor, that is purifying the sense of speech. Of course, and we should understand this point, we need to directly speak about Krishna also. I went to see one sannyasi when I was at Govardhan, actually. He invited me to come and see him. And he gave me a private class. He said, just come over, just you and me. And he gave me a private. So for the first 15, 20 minutes, we were just talking. He was saying, oh, he hadn't seen me for, 5, 10 years. So he said, what's going on, questions. So, we're speaking. And then he said, okay, now, Krishna Katha. And then he gave me a class on the Brihad Bhagavatamrita by Srila Rupa Goswami for about half an hour. Just, speaking his realizations about what he was studying. And then he said, any questions? So it was nice. And then we spoke more after that. So we purify our sense of speech by speaking about Krishna, but we have to speak topics directly related to Krishna also, not just things indirectly related. That's important, and that's Krishna Katha. But there has to be direct discussion about, like we're doing now. We're speaking directly from the Shastra. That needs to be there in our Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada says, the talking of materialistic men and impersonal Mayavad philosophies may be compared to the croaking of frogs. They are always speaking nonsense and thus inviting death to catch them. Controlling speech, however, does not mean self-imposed silence. So, if you speak, some people just speak and speak and speak. It's like a frog just calling death. A frog is in the grass going, he likes the sound of his voice, and the snake is coming, who is death, coming to eat him. And the snake says, keep speaking. I'll find you. And then takes him. So if we use our sense of speech, not in Krishna's service, we're just calling death closer. And Prabhupada says, we should not just engage in silence. We can speak, but we must speak about Krishna. We don't just practice silence. Silence is actually very beneficial for a lot of people, actually. Very beneficial. One time we did a holy name retreat, not this time, but another time, and we walked up on top of the hill in Varshana, and we were doing a 64 round day. So we walked up on the hill, and at the bottom of the hill, about 9 in the morning, at the beginning of the day, and we're coming back down at 5. So we're going to be up there all day chanting. Sachinandan Swami said, okay, we're taking a vow of silence. So you weren't allowed to speak to anyone. You just had to chant the whole day. Very powerful. Very, very, very beneficial. So vows of silence are good for many people. But for us, then, we don't just do silence, we hear and chant about Krishna. That's the perfection of speaking. The big okay. So on page 5, on the second paragraph, Prabhupada says the restlessness or fickleness of the mind, manasavega, is controlled when one can fix his mind at the lotus feet of Krishna. So this is the second urge, vachavega, manasavega, the urge of the mind. The mind has urges. The mind is always thinking of something. The mind always wants to do something. And that's the urge of the mind. So therefore, Prabhupada says, how do you control the mind? You fix it on the lotus feet of Krishna, which means you think of Krishna or you think of Krishna's service, which is non-different from Krishna. And that way you purify the mind. Further down, Prabhupada says, the yogic process of negating all material thoughts will not help. To try to create a vacuum in the mind is artificial. However, if one always thinks of Krishna and how to serve Krishna best, one's mind will naturally be controlled. So this is the best way to control the mind. Don't try to empty it of thoughts, because it's not possible. You know, people, some yoga groups, some meditation groups, they teach that. Just, empty the mind. You can't empty the mind. It's not possible. So learn to think about Krishna or Krishna's service. Then at the bottom of the page, Prabhupada speaks about anger. Similarly, anger must be controlled. It can be controlled. We cannot stop anger altogether, but if we simply become angry with those who blaspheme the Lord or the devotees of the Lord, we control our anger in Krishna consciousness. So, how do you control anger? Anger is a powerful force, and anger is something that is within all of us. Right? We all have anger within us. This is explained in I think it's the 3rd canto of the Bhagavatam. Everyone has anger in them. Why? Because Krishna has it in him. So that's why anger exists. It's within all of us. But we have to learn to control anger. In other words, you have to use anger in Krishna's service. What is the purpose of anger? To remove obstacles in Krishna's service. Right? If there's something in our way that is stopping us from serving Krishna, we'll use anger to remove that thing, and then we'll continue. Prabhupada showed us this. Sometimes Prabhupada would become angry, even very angry, in Krishna's service, but he would pick it up like a tool from the toolkit. He would use it to remove the obstacle, and then he would put it back in. And my Guru Maharaj, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and others, they said that Prabhupada was like that. Sometimes he'd become angry, and then as soon as he'd finished, chastising someone or correcting someone and being angry, the next moment he was completely equipoised again. So it's just something that we use to remove obstacles, but then we put it down. We don't let it consume us or control us. Prabhupada says, the point is that one should be ready to tolerate all insults to oneself. This is something I've been trying to do recently because I'm not a very tolerant person. I'm not very tolerant. People who know me well know that I'm not very tolerant. So I've been trying to be more tolerant and to let go of anger. When I feel frustrated by something, to let it go more easily. As Prabhupada says, the point is one should be ready to tolerate. We have to learn tolerance. It's one of Krishna's first instructions in the Bhagavad Gita. Titiksha swa, karunika, it says in the Bhagavatam. Krishna also says, Macha spashas tukunteya shitoshna sukha dukada agama payano nichas tam titikshasva bharata. We have to learn tolerance. You have to learn to tolerate. Otherwise, you'll be angry all the time. If you're not tolerant, you'll be angry all the time because even today, like I drove into Geelong. Some people don't drive very well. Joke. You joke. I mean, I don't know, maybe I've noticed it more or something. It's one of the first times I've driven since I got back. So I didn't drive for a month. You know, so I mean, India's more crazy. The roads are more crazy, but I was driving. I just think people don't drive well. It's really silly. You know, like, I don't know, not even thinking. Yeah, and one lady I could see, she was on her phone. She had it, I could see it. And like, she's at the corner and she's got an indicator to go that way. And, you know, but she's obviously on her phone. I'm behind her. I couldn't go because she's blocking it. So I actually ended up going around her. Then I drove off and I looked over and I could see she's on her phone. And she ends up going the way I'm going anyway. She's indicating to go that way and she drives that way. So we have to learn to be tolerant. Yeah. Because then you overcome your anger. Because I thought, oh, you know, I was angry at her. You know, she's just wasting my time. I don't have a lot of time today. I've got things to do. But then I was trying to control, you know. Oh, sorry. Okay, so this is the next paragraph. So the first three urges are Vachavegam, Manasa, Krodha. So the mind, the speech, and anger. The next three are, please grab the extension cord, because I'm just worried it's going to, yeah, the battery was full. Yeah, we'll need the extension cord to make it. Yeah, we're just getting the extension cord. I thought my battery was full, but now it's almost empty. It's obviously chewed up a lot more than what we thought. So, as it's saying, the next three of the urges are the tongue in respect to eating. We already heard about the tongue in respect to speaking. Now, the tongue in respect to eating, then the urge of the tongue, the belly, and the genitals. These three are connected, as Prabhupada will explain. It says here in the paragraph near the bottom of page 6. As for the urges of the tongue, we all experience that the tongue wants to eat palatable dishes. Generally, we should not allow the tongue to eat according to its choice, but should control the tongue by supplying prasad. So this is how Prabhupada's giving us a practical way to control our tongue. How do we control our tongue or the urge to eat? We control the tongue or the urge to eat by only eating Krishna's prasadam. This is an austerity which devotees need to learn to perform, right? Only eat prasad or food which has been offered to Krishna. By doing this, we will learn to control our tongue. But then, in terms of only eating food offered to Krishna, we also have to learn to control our tongue while taking prasadam. Because in the beginning, Srila Prabhupada says, we can eat so much that we waddle like a duck. We can eat a lot of prasadam, honor a lot of prasadam. But then in due course, Prabhupada says, we have to control our intake of prasadam. We have to control the intake of prasadam. You can't even prasadam. You control the tongue by eating prasadam, but eventually you have to control how much prasadam you eat and what type of prasadam you eat. Because if you only eat rich prasadam, then unless you're working physically very hard, Prabhupada says, if you work hard, you can digest rocks, which is true. You know, we can eat rich prasadam, but then if you're out working hard, you'll burn it off. But if you're just hearing and chanting, like we just did a holy name retreat, you know, some days we're chanting 64 rounds. Other days we're chanting 12-hour kirtans. You know, oh no, it was the day that we had the seminars where there was about 3 hours of seminars. And I had a bit too much for breakfast. And then, you know, first seminar, I was like, you know, trying to stay awake, you know, I was like, oh, you know, drifting off. And like, it was hard. Because if you don't control your tongue or how much prasadam you eat, then you will find it hard to practice your devotional service. So we have to learn to control the tongue. Prabhupada said, if we stick to the principle of taking only prasadam, the urges of the belly and the tongue can be controlled. So we have to learn to control the belly, because the belly likes the feeling of being full. But there's a feeling, right? And you see people who are particularly obese. I mean, I'm overweight, but people who are particularly obese, they just love that feeling of, you know, packing more in. You know, the stomach's sending messages up saying, there's no more room. And, you know, you just keep putting prasadam in there. It's like, again, that feeling of when the belly is full, it gives like a satisfaction. But then, if you eat too much, you'll sleep too much. And it'll be very hard to practice devotional service. So therefore, we have to regulate how much we eat. Control the tongue and the belly. Then at the bottom of the page, Prabhupada says, in a similar manner, the urges of the genitals, the sex impulse, can be controlled when not used unnecessarily. So on the highest level, control of the genitals means only to use them to procreate children in Krishna consciousness. Even devotees struggle with that. Even initiated devotees struggle with that. Right? But that's the highest level. Sex life is to procreate children. Otherwise, it's illicit sex. Right? And when you engage in illicit sex, your consciousness becomes impure, because you'll find, I think everyone's had that experience, that when you engage in illicit sex, what does the mind meditate on during the day? The act of sex. Right? And then you're not thinking of Krishna, because you can't be thinking of Krishna and sense gratification simultaneously. So it distracts you. And what does the practice of sex life, which is one of the 4 regulative principles, to not engage in illicit sex. When you engage in sex life, it destroys the quality of purity. In other words, your consciousness becomes contaminated. Right? Externally and internally, you become contaminated. Prabhupada says at the top of page 7, the Krishna consciousness movement encourages marriage not for the satisfaction of the genitals, but for begetting of Krishna conscious children. That's why, you know, Prabhupada's instruction on the highest level for those in the Krishna consciousness movement. If you want to have sex life, you're allowed to have it once a month to beget children. And Prabhupada said you have to chant 64 rounds. Or 50 rounds. Prabhupada said 50 rounds. Once a month, 50 rounds to try to have Krishna conscious children. That's controlling the genitals. And then one devotee, Prabhupada, this is back in 1966, very early, Prabhupada, you know, it's just beginning the movement, he said that. And then he said, well, if you can only have sex once a month, then what's the point of even having sex? And Prabhupada said, exactly. What's the point? What's the point of sex? What's the point? It's just sense gratification, which distracts you from your Krishna consciousness. So that's why the Upadeshamrita is saying you have to control the mind, the speech, the anger, the tongue, the belly, and the genitals if you want to go back to Godhead. It takes time. It takes time. It's not an easy thing to overcome. But if we want to get serious about Krishna consciousness, this is the instruction we're given by Rupa Goswami. Then Prabhupada says, when one is fully practiced in the methods of Krishna conscious control, he can become qualified to be a bona fide spiritual master. That's what the verse says. This is the qualification to become a guru, a Goswami. You have to control your senses. If you can't control these 6 urges, you can't become a guru. You're not qualified to be a guru. Yeah. So therefore, you have to control these 6 urges. That's the qualification. And you see all of our gurus, that's their qualification. They've controlled these 6 urges. And they're qualified to make disciples. So Prabhupada then, in the remainder of the purport, he analyzes the urges again, and he makes further comments, goes through the different urges and explains how to control them. And as we go to the you read the purport in your own time, because we only have limited time in this class, so you'll need to read the purport in your own time. But I've only covered like the first half of the purport, but Prabhupada explains how to control the 6 urges, then he does it again. He goes into even more detail. So you'll need to read this in your own time, because these purports are very powerful. And it's actually very interesting because Rupa Prabhu was telling us that Srila Prabhupada, when he would dictate, he was using the dictaphone. If you go to Vrindavan, you can actually see his dictaphone, which Prabhupada was using. You might have seen videos of him where he speaks into the dictaphone, and then they would give the tapes to his secretary. They would transcribe them and then send them to the BBT, who would then edit them and then publish them. But Aniruddha Prabhu told us, it's very interesting, on the Nectar of Instruction, Prabhupada normally spoke in the dictaphone. He actually spoke directly to Sri Rupa Maharaj, who wrote all of this down. And when they sent it to the BBT, it was actually given in written form, as opposed to, so it's just interesting. Prabhupada used a different method on this particular one. It's just interesting. Not necessarily, but yeah, not sure why he's done it that way, but for some reason. Yeah, Aniruddha Prabhu said it was handwritten. Just interesting that happened like that. So next week, your homework will be verses 2 and 3, which verse 2 speaks about the 6 things that we need to the 6 things that we need to avoid, which will destroy our Krishna consciousness. And then verse 3 speaks about the 6 things that we need, positive things that we need to imbibe to advance in Krishna consciousness. So that will be your homework for next week. One sannyasi, one advanced devotee, I remember hearing him say one time, the first 3 verses of the Nectar of Instruction, the Upadeshamrita, are the secrets to bhajan, which means they're the secrets to successful sadhana. If you can practice what's being spoken in these first 3 verses of the Nectar of Instruction, the Upadeshamrita, then you will advance very quickly in Krishna consciousness. Thank you all for coming. Good to see you all. Good to be back again with all of you. I had a very rewarding trip. But yeah, last couple of days, sometimes it happens early, sometimes it happens later, but last couple, I just felt it was exactly the right time to come back and get into some service. So I feel enthused.